to retired British Army officer and military logistics expert, Major General Sir Tim Pross, CBE. Sir Tim, thanks for joining us. Welcome. What's your take on the way things are this Remembrance weekend, and what are you doing, if anything?
I'm doing quite a bit. I was up in London during the week. I'm actually speaking at a big public school called Stowe on Sunday to about 700 or 800 young lads and girls and their teachers and so on.
Yeah.
I've spoken on Remembrance Sunday, and it's on Remembrance Sunday rather than November the 11th.
Yeah.
For the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years. And picking up a couple of points you said, when I was in London, I actually did notice that less people are wearing poppies. And I think this intimidation of the poppy sellers is pretty disgraceful. And it's an important issue. It's not just, well, there's two issues really. One is the money they raise. And Gary was talking about the fact that the veterans, you know, they're getting older. They need support, and the various military charities help out and provide all sorts of support to the veterans. And that money, a lot of that money comes from this Remembrance weekend. Yeah. So the fact that not so many people are buying poppies is, you know, concerning. Yeah. I think the other thing is, and, you know, the demonstration, I should say up front that I served 43 years, man and boy. You know, without being over the top about it, that service, as much as anything else, was to serve and to try to preserve freedom of opinion, freedom of speech, freedom of marching, and so on. But it was also about defending the rule of law. And you know, you've talked a little bit about these demonstrations. I don't like these demonstrations much, if I'm honest. But I think people should be allowed to do that. But we do need to ensure, the police do need to ensure that they're kept well away from these Remembrance Sunday and Remembrance Day on Saturday commemorations, because this is about the nation remembering what people have given, sacrificed themselves for a long time, obviously as a result of World War I, but all the wars since. And, you know, Northern Ireland's been mentioned. I served in the Balkans 3 times, in Iraq a couple of times, as well as Northern Ireland. But it's also about Thanksgiving as a nation, remembering and thanking people for their service and trying to ensure that we don't get embroiled in this stuff again in the future. I mean, we all know that wars will continue, and there are 42 wars going on at the moment around the world. And in places like Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia and the Azerbaijan and so forth, some pretty brutal things have been happening. But people don't seem to care much about it. I don't know what it is about this Israeli situation.
Yeah, well, that is the problem, isn't it? And I mean, Hugh, that's another interesting point that we've been talking about throughout the course of this week, really, that some people have said, yeah, well, the thing is, what better day to ask for peace and do a peace march, which I'm absolutely sure that it is anyway, than on Armistice Day. But it's not really about peace, Armistice Day, is it? It's about, as Tim said there, it's about remembering, it's about thanking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, General Tim picked something up there. You know, we are tolerant in that many millions have given their lives, sacrificed their lives, so that we and our children benefit from the democracy and freedom of speech. Absolutely. But there is a very clear line, and when you cross that line and start intimidating, threatening, when you start becoming the aggressor and effectively breaking the law, they have to be lifted. And it's no good just lifting them and giving them a slap on the wrist. They need to be double quick marched at green jacket time into the nearest court and dealt with next week, not in 6 months' time. Right. But now, of course, we're back to whether the judicial system can actually manage that. Well, that is a problem.
Well, that is a problem, because up until now, they've policed these marches, and I'll bring you back into this, Tim. They've policed these marches in a very softly manner, which has only encouraged these people to continue marching. We're sort of told, oh, well, they're very law-abiding, these marches, because hardly anyone's been arrested. Well, that's because they're not arresting anyone, and they're waiting later to arrest them. But tomorrow and Saturday and Sunday, if there's any activity, if people want to disrupt the 2-minute silence or anything to do with Armistice Day, they have to stop them from doing it rather than letting them do it and then arresting them next week, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic, really, that those who supposedly march for peace are often the ones who are quite prepared to use violence in these marches. I mean, one of the problems for the police, to be fair, is that these large demonstrations, it's pretty difficult to go in and lift the people you want to lift. I mean, the guys will know from Northern Ireland days how we used to deal with that. And I was a bomb disposal operator in Northern Ireland and was out in the streets quite a bit with the guys who would lift you know, people who are causing trouble. But to lift people out of the sort of crowds you're looking at now is really very difficult. So they do use, you know, modern techniques, in inverted commas, technology to identify people and deal with them later. But just to pick on the other point that I think Hugh raised, is that when I was a commander, company commander, CO, brigade commander, divisional commander, I ended up as the commander of one of the 3 divisions of the field army. Military justice happens quickly. The problem with this stuff, and it's like the Stop Oil protesters and many other people who cause grief in London and elsewhere, is it just takes forever to bring these people to justice. And when they finally, you know, do appear, some of the sentencing seems to be a bit bizarre. Now, I say that, I was in Pentonville Prison on yesterday afternoon. I go into Pentonville Prison quite a bit to speak to some of the prisoners there. You know, and I'm not lock them up and throw away the key bloke. I mean, I love the soldiers who had the privilege to lead, and I love the guys who are knocked up. Many of them come from really difficult backgrounds and so on. So, you know, I'm not sweeping generalizing here, but the people who cause trouble on these marches need to be dealt with quickly, and there needs to be a deterrent for it. And that does seem to be a problem in today's world.
Yes.
Alongside all sorts of stuff, you know,
Yeah,
emotional.
and I think that's what the problem is that if you don't deter these marches, we'll be doing them for the rest of time. There'll be a march next week and the week after that and the week after that, and until they decide they want to stop doing it.
Yeah, and you know, it worries me because, you know, the British military system has worked on a set of rules and regulations for many, many years, for decades, hundreds, that work.
Yeah.
The minute you start trying to take the sort of liberalised social system and overlay it onto the military system,
well, that's right,
then I'm afraid we have a problem.
Well, the Australian army, I don't know if you've seen this, you probably have seen it, have apparently just recently this week ordered that they're going to do away with gender-style names. You know, so man-hours are going to be going. You might be, I don't know how they're going to call different officers and different regiments and all of that, but they're doing away with it. And you kind of go, you said the army, guys. I mean, for heaven's sake.
Yeah. I mean, and as we know, and General Sir Mike Jackson, of course, was going to be appearing this evening.
Yes,
and
we send our best to
We
him.
wish you well, General Mike.
He wasn't able to
speedy recovery, but as General Mike has often said in public, we ask young men and women to sign a contract of unlimited liability. In no other walk of life do we ask that of anyone.
Yes.
And therefore, you know, there are certain types who are prepared to do that, and thank God there are. And they have to adhere to certain rules and regulations. That's how society functions. But the minute we start taking those rules, those regulations, those limitations and constraints down, I'm afraid we're going into challenging waters, I think.
Well, lawless territory, I
Indeed.
guess.